3. Good evening and welcome to this European conference about the migration crisis.
During this decade, the refugee burning issue has deeply concerned the member states of the European Union due to the fact that it has caused many organizational and functional problems. In order to give this problem a satisfying solution, the committee has come up with a plan. So we would like to know your opinions and your concerns about this problem and its solution. We will start with the Netherlands. Welcome. And what is your country's policy about the recent refugees issue?
I am here to represent the Netherlands, and in recent years the number of asylum applications has increased. It went from 10,000 to 60,000 in just 5 years.
What are the highlights of this policy?
We have created, we give them healthcare, labor market and housing, and we also created a program which is called Meraki. This is created to help the refugees find a job, a temporary job, and improve their lives.
And what are the highlights against of this?
Most decisions in 2015 were positive, made by Syrians and Africans, but Albania and Ukraine rejected most of the groups at almost 100%.
And what are the difficulties forthcoming in everyday life in your country?
The main difficulty is that we give a lot of funds to a lot of people, but they take advantage of that, so we were forced to make it more difficult. So we have economic crisis because of that.
And what would you suggest in personal?
I would suggest that instead of making it that hard for people to take funds, we could just limit them to a specific group of people that actually need it.
Thank you for your time, Netherlands. Let's keep going with Greece. What is your country's policy about the recent refugees crisis?
I'm being here to represent my home country of Greece. I would have to say that the refugee issue is a worldwide concern, but Greece is a special and struggling unit in this matter because 50,000 and more refugees have fled violence from the Middle East and South and Central Asia and have seen Greece as an entry to the rest of Europe. But sadly, they can no longer legally go into further Europe and have to stay permanently in Greece. Nevertheless, Greece has maintained a positive stance about the refugee matter and continues to do so. Its policy stands for sheltering and supporting people in need. Even though the matter requires facilities and finance Greece does not obtain, it tries its hardest to do the best that is possible.
In your opinion, what are the highlights of this policy?
Highlights that showcase this policy are the new asylums that we have made and the committees that supervise these asylums. Also, government has granted a number of rights and protection for the refugees. Furthermore, we have free healthcare for people in need, like injured people and pregnant women, and some new laws considering education, habitats, and more.
And what are the highlights for and against this policy?
These were the highlights for, but against the country, even though its people may have shown some negative superstitions in its political matters, even if some politics have made their efforts, there haven't been any actions that are not as helpful as they can be about this issue.
And what are the difficulties forthcoming in everyday in your country?
Every day we face problems with finance, our insufficient facilities, and the fact that we do not have the space, neither the time to handle and accommodate 50,000 people. There are people left homeless and in need without the basic stuff they need in their daily lives.
And what would you suggest in personal?
From my point of view, the problem is one that all countries, especially European ones, should share. It is unfair for one country to give all that it has and more, and others to just practice in theory and not in action. I would suggest some funding from more developed countries in Europe and an equal division of refugees throughout Europe.
Thank you, Greece. Let's continue with Poland. Poland, what is your country's policy?
The Polish government did not let the refugees cross the borders because they believe that Muslim immigrants could be a problem for Poland's homogeneous society. Furthermore, the Prime Minister of Poland expressed his opinion about not permitting the refugees to enter the country. While the government stance was the same, some bishops of Poland's church helped them to enter the country. The main leader of Poland's bishops said that if they don't accept the refugees cross the borders, this particularly means they will not be Christian anymore.
What are the highlights of this policy?
The highlight is that bishops didn't make them change their mind because the Prime Minister said that I'm a Christian and I try to be a good person, which means that a good Christian is someone who helps, not necessarily by accepting refugees. Europe, because of this policy, had been pressing the Polish authorities to begin accepting asylum seekers. Poland has received large groups of refugees in recent years. In 2015, Poland has received 500,000 refugees. In the few months, it was already clear that refugees would exceed prior expectations. European institutions focus mainly on pushing for a solution which aims to relocate immigrants across the Europe.
And last but not least, what would you suggest in personal?
In personal, I would suggest to help the countries which are in a war by solving their problems with a peaceful way, since history has proved us that wars never stop. Consequently, the solution that I propose in order to overcome the huge wave of immigrants and refugees is the following. We have to separate the immigrants from refugees. The European community should establish a financing fund to support the countries which welcome the refugees and the immigrants. These countries should also make infrastructures in order to host these people for some months. Moreover, teams of people with special knowledge on the human rights should be placed this infrastructure. They will check which of the illegal incoming people to these countries are refugees or immigrants. The immigrants should be sent back to their countries and the refugees must be shared proportionally in all European countries.
Thank you for your time, Poland. Let's continue with Austria. What do you think is your country policy about the recent refugee crisis?
All the governments in the last 20 years in Austria have made it clear that we are not particularly thrilled to have migrants and asylum seekers. But if they were here already, efforts were made to make them active members of society. The big change now is that the conditions are made as inconvenient, as unfriendly and as hostile as they can be, in the hope that migrants and asylum seekers will disappear. That is the policy being crucial in Austria right now.
Thank you. And what are the highlights for and against?
Although Austria for many years has been a bridge for refugees to pass to other countries, since 2015 Austria's political system has changed because of pressure from the media and its struggling citizens. They try to not accept many refugees. Austria also has left the UN Global Migration Pact because of its inability to handle the problem. Applications have dropped profoundly. Most of them were from the Middle East. Finally, they make strict laws to discourage refugees.
Thank you. And lastly, what is your personal suggestion?
Personally, I would suggest accepting some refugees because they are also humans and they have the same rights as us. They have left their countries for some serious reason, for example, war. In my opinion, Austria would be important and this can be a great example for all of the countries all over the world.
Thank you, very nice. Let's continue with Italy. What is your country policy about the situation?
Italy has experienced significant inflows of Middle Eastern and African workers in recent decades. Italy's reaction to refugees crisis is not really negative or positive, as the government is in disagreement. Some of the politicians support the entrance of asylum seekers in Italy, but some others stand against it. More specifically, the last decade, Italy has received a quite big amount of immigrants because it has been provided by governments of other countries of the European Union.
And what are the highlights for and against?
A concerted pushback to this system emerged in 2018 with government using legal and other tools to fight back. Italy has not taken a first position on this issue of immigration. First of all, they accept a specific number of immigrants. However, they have shown a kind of negative attitude to asylum seekers. For example, they have been accused for sabotaging and for blocking refugees' entrance into the country by sinking their ships. As a result, the immigrants have died, even though the Italy government refused it.
What are the difficulties forthcoming in nowadays life in your country?
Faced with absorbing vast numbers of asylum seekers who headed to Europe, resulting in migration crisis. More specific, Italy struck a deal with Libya and Albania. To sum up, most immigrants are moving to the north-central side of Italy, causing a rise of the criminality rates.
What would you suggest in personal?
In my point of view, Italy is right to call for and accept more European cooperation in the Central and Mediterranean and European Union. Governments should agree on a serious relocation mechanism. Italy can and should lead the way to more human policies and land and at sea. Finally, efforts must be made from all of us to achieve this objective.
Thank you for your time, Natalie. Let's close with Denmark. What is your option? What is your opinion about your country's policy in the situation?
Well, hello, I'm here to represent Denmark, and in my country, the last 5 years, we have sent a pretty clear and consistent message to all the asylum seekers. This message couldn't have been other, of course, than stay away. The last numbers of people asking for asylum in Denmark have shown that this message have been effectively and successfully get across, because these numbers have been importantly reduced, especially after the year 2015, which were the last elections, which had been won, of course, by a center-right coalition. The new government didn't, of course, try to block the entrance of the refugees by blocking the borders. Instead, we have voted for and put in practice new restrictive laws and measurements which made Denmark an extremely unappealing and unattractive country to all the refugees.
And what do you believe are the highlights of this policy?
Well, I would like to inform you about some of the highlights and some of the measures that we took. First of all, the government decided to cut down refugees' benefits for 45%, and in addition, they advertised this cut in newspapers in Lebanon, a country where a lot of refugees come from. In addition, we gave the authorities the license to seize assets and money valued over 1,000 Danish crowns from refugees as a help to pay for their subsistence to the country. Furthermore, according to a new law, a refugee who has managed to live in Denmark is not permitted to see their family for 3 years. In other words, immigrants living in Denmark cannot apply to bring their families into the country unless they have completed 3 years at least of living here. To sum up, we observe that the government of Denmark doesn't practically prevent any asylum seekers from entering the country. We just make them not to choose Denmark as a destination because of our really harsh measurements and the way that we treat them.
Thank you. And can you explain to us why you face refugees in this way?
Of course, you might be wondering why we treat them like that. Well, the answer to this question is pretty simple. Denmark is a really wealthy country that has worked really hard the last few years to achieve providing to its people a lot of benefits and high standards of education and healthcare. So the Danish people simply say, why should we put these benefits, our benefits, in danger just because more people want to come in? And I completely agree with their fears, and I believe that all the people of every nation in the world would be really scared of a situation like that, because they feel that their benefits are in danger because of incoming populations, foreign populations.
What would you suggest in personal?
Well, although I believe with the people of my country and I agree with them, I also believe that the refugee matter is a pretty serious situation that we can't face just by denying facing it with. In every country, if every country insists in a passive stance, then bigger problems will sooner or later appear, because the congestion of a huge mass of people in just one and small territory like Greece is not a solution. This is why I would recommend the fair division of the refugee population to all the European states, according, of course, to each one's size of country, economical state, and to each one's ability of covering the needs of the refugee population and its own population at the same time. I also believe that Denmark and every European country could take advantage of the refugees and asylum seekers by using them as workforce to build new construction projects and new city centers where they will be living with their families in the future. Until then, a big amount of refugee families could be living under the state of Danish families, in which the government will of course provide a decent amount of money for every foreign family that they accommodate, using of course the money that they seize from asylum seekers when they enter the country. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you all for attending this conference. We are pleased that you were all here, and we are expecting the best results for this situation, and we want to solve it in the best way. Thank you.
Thank you.
And what are the highlights of this policy?
Well, I would like to inform you about some of the restrictive measures that we took. First of all, the government decided to cut down refugees' benefits for 45%, and they also advertised this cut to newspapers in Lebanon, a country where a lot of refugees come from, in order, of course, to make sure that the message had been understood. In addition, we gave the authorities the license to...